Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Peyton Robertson. I'm the Director of the National Weather Service Office of Organizational Excellence. So thanks to everybody who's here at NCEP, everybody who's out there in webinar land. Good afternoon. Good morning to folks out in Hawaii and Alaska and the Western region. We're really excited to be here with you today to talk a little bit about the new National Weather Service Strategic Plan. We've got a great panel behind me that I'm going to introduce in just a second. But first of all, for those that are here in the room, just ask you to mute your cell phones, turn off any devices that are going to make any noise so we don't interrupt the broadcast out to our colleagues in the field and elsewhere. Also, really just want to have you sort of give us some feedback on what we're doing here today. This is a different format for an all hands. We're trying it. It's a first try. Hopefully we won't have any glitches, but bear with us and just sort of kick back and enjoy the ride. We're gonna try this out. So let me tell you what we're trying out in terms of what you can see behind me. You can see that this is a little bit like The View, if anybody watches that. But it's a little different than just folks at a podium, right, with a microphone saying lots of fascinating remarks. Instead, we've got sort of a question and answer format, and that's going to be led by Christina Crow, who's over here. She's a master instructor at the at the Leadership Institute, Leadership Academy out at the Kansas City Training Center. Next to Christina is Dave Michaud. He's the director of our Office of Central Processing. Next to Dave is Kathy Gilbert. She's the deputy director of the Ocean Prediction Center and the Weather Prediction Center. Going over this shoulder, we've got Kelsey Angle. He's the meteorologist in charge from the Springfield, Missouri Weather Forecast Office. And last but certainly not least is Mary Erickson, who's our deputy director of the Weather Service. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Louis Uccellini, our director, to come up and make some opening remarks, and then we're going to go to the panel. Louis.
This is definitely not on The View, you know. So anyway, good afternoon and good morning to the folks further west of us. Yes, so today we are rolling out our new strategic plan, right? And I know there are many folks who are wondering why we're excited and about this. So number one is that it expands upon the current strategic plan, which is based on building a weather-ready nation. Now, this I can tell you from experience, about 40 years of experience of working, developing strategic plans, that the one we're working under today is probably one of the most, if it is, the most successful plan I've ever been involved with. And I want to emphasize that that view is based upon my visits to forecast offices around the country, watching what's happening on the Hill, watching what's happening with the partners that we've connected with, who have basically said that we have revolutionized their activities based on what we're bringing to the table today that we weren't 6 years ago. Now, for those who wonder exactly what I'm talking about, just a brief review. Building Weather-Ready Nation involves addressing the nation's increasing vulnerability by ensuring that communities are ready, responsive to impending extreme weather events, especially weather water-connected events. As you'll see, this new plan formally expands that to weather, water, climate events. What is involved in that ready, responsive nature? Ready because we have, I believe, the best forecast in the world, the best warning processes in the world. They're responsive because we've continued to work with our partners out, especially in the emergency management community, but all partners in public safety at the federal, state, and local levels. It's been amazing actually to watch this evolve and to hear from those people how extraordinary our performance is, not based on a skill score of a forecast, but based on the information that we've been able to provide that has proactively positioned these folks to deal with these extreme events, and in that regard, increase the resiliency. So I have no doubt in my mind that this has been the best strategic activities that we could have brought to the table. And I should note that it was a small team. that developed this plan. I was really proud to be part of that. The first time I got educated on working towards a strategic outcome and not a bunch of goals that were just focused on meteorological parameters. And I also want to call out Bill Hopkins, who brought this plan to the workforce, into every office for their input into this. And let me tell you, the big issue that we addressed with this plan was going beyond a forecast and warning, that our job didn't end with just making a forecast and issuing a warning. We had to deal with the connectivity to decision makers. That was a big deal 6 years ago. It's not a big deal today, right? We've embraced it, and in many ways, I believe the field is leading the way. Examples. I've been to the IAEM, the International Association of Emergency Management community meetings. It's sort of like the AMS annual meeting. Over the last several years, they've had presentations made with an emergency manager and a weather service person. Emergency manager laying out the parameters for decisions, whether it's evacuating a county fair, whether it's dealing with fires, whether it's dealing with severe weather or flood situations. This year, when I watched it, I sat back and watched the panel discussion with these pairs and said to myself, they got it. All right? This is a field embrace of a genuine field embrace of a whole new way of doing business, breaking down the cultural barriers that were involved with the belief that your job just ended with a forecast and warning. I've visited over 100 offices over the last 6 years. And during that period, I've watched the offices bring to me, as part of that visit, their belief in the collaborative forecast process. Working with other offices, working with national centers, working with the regional offices as true partners in their forecast and their warnings, getting the most accurate and most consistent. Remember, consistency is a big part of this if you want emergency managers to work with the information. Right? Seen it blow those cultural barriers away that got in the way of the collaborative forecast process. The whole office concept, I've seen that evolve over the last 6 years. I'm going to cite one office. I hope I don't embarrass them in doing so. But the Corpus Christi visit after Harvey. We get these 2x2s, 2 slides, 2 minutes. They present 2 slides. It usually takes 20 minutes because I got too many questions, right? So this office decided to lead off with the ASA. Right? This is the person that sits in the front of the office. It's usually the first person that an outsider will meet coming into the office or when they call in. This ASA was very important in working the evacuation orders that we needed to get signed off if, in fact, we had to evacuate that forecast office in the face of Harvey. You should have heard her talk. She's all in. She was all in on this Weather Ready Nation. Then they brought in the IT specialists, the ITOs, the folks that had to keep the systems working. Right? You want 99.9% reliability because your partners want to know you're there all the time and can connect with them. And then the facilities person, who had to deal with the floods, the water seeping in from beneath the raised floor. And then they got to the observations, the OPAL, and then the forecast and warnings in their connectivity. They were making the point about the whole office being in. I'm seeing this over and over and over again. So pretty impressive change over 6 years. So why the new plan and why now? The fact is, we have a number of changes that have occurred over 6 years, which provides a framework to expand. The most important one is the Weather Act. And for those who haven't memorized Title IV, that's your homework assignment. Memorize Title IV of the Weather Act. Because in that, it's directed right at the Weather Service. It's directed right at what we've been doing over the last 6 years in building a Weather Ready Nation by providing the increased IDSS to federal, state, local, and tribal nations. All right? It's pretty impressive. And then now they have the states also listed, island states out in the Pacific in the updated version of that. So increase IDSS across all those levels of government. We're now authorized to do that for the first time. So we have that. From a science perspective, there is the weather-water climate linkage. I've been around long enough to know about stovepipes, folks. Those are being obliterated too, and in certain respects, we're leading the way. So that linkage is built into this plan. We recognized early on that we couldn't do it alone, that this was something that would have to involve the entire enterprise. We now have 9,200 Weather Ready Nation ambassadors, which are organizations that involve our private sector partners and social groups, et cetera, people who are essential for weaving this whole process of whatever input we can bring into the social fabric of decision making ahead of one of these major events. We have to build on that, embrace on that. So you'll see in this new plan an increasing focus on the partnerships. You'll also see an increasing focus on the need to improve our science and technology as we move forward. If you're dealing with these linkages, if you want to do extreme events far enough in advance, you can't do that without having the climate background state and its changes that could influence that. And our emergency management communities are making decisions much further in advance now. Right? Irma, 6.5 days before landfall, the state of Florida declares a national emergency. How did that happen? Right? With our input. We got to be able to recognize that this is going to remain a challenge for us, and we have to build on that. The last thing I'll note about and all this is going to be covered in more detail, is this plan also includes core principles that were developed with your input. Our people drive our success. We provide the best forecast possible. We cannot do it alone. We strive for excellence. This is really a true reflection of our workforce, and as the most dedicated workforce in the federal government, practically any government, and I'm not making that up. It's in every review and every book that's been written about how our workforce is dedicated to our mission and for public service. This is what we're bringing, and now we have this strategic goal to drive. And that's probably one of the main reasons why I believe the workforce has not only embraced this plan, but are leading the way, because of the recognition it's not just there to build a weather-ready nation, but to actually realize our mission. We can't realize our mission without taking this step and connecting with the folks who are actually on the ground saving lives and mitigating property loss. So I want to thank you for the embrace of the current plan. I believe very strongly you'll see how what we're bringing to the table today is a natural extension of that plan. And it's extremely important that we have this updated version, that we can continue to lead the way, not only for us, and not only for the enterprise as we know it in the United States, but for the global enterprise, as we have already started building weather-ready nations, plural, with 8 pilot projects around the globe. So with that, I thank you for your attention. I'm really excited about the prospects that we have with this plan. And Christina, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Louis, very much for those opening remarks. While we're transitioning here a little bit, just a little bit of housekeeping. We intend for this to be a discussion here, but we also want to invite questions, both from those who are on the webinar and those in the room. If you have questions, please feel free to submit them as we're going through. Those on the webinar can submit via the questions chat box and go to webinar. Those of you in the room, Mary in the back has some note cards. You can feel free to write a question and get it to her. And anything that doesn't get answered here during the session today will get put up on the Insider when the recording of this goes up as well. So, all right, I'll grab this. Thank you, sir. There we go. All right, so now with that done, Mary, I want to start with a question for you. With kind of a high-level question, Louis mentioned the strategic plan in 2011 that we had. What's different about this plan versus the 2011?
So I want to start with building on something that Louis just mentioned, which I'm really excited about that's different in this plan, which is the core principles. As Louis said, those were developed, and I really like the way we did that. We went out to the field, we asked all of the employees to weigh in on this. And I think it's really a reflection of that evolution that Louis mentioned from 2011 when we started with the last strategic plan. It really reflects the culture. It reflects who we are and what we care about. So thinking about our people driving our success, all those examples and stories as we visit both with you in the field as well as when we hear from our partners, and they're telling us about the wonderful things that all of you are doing that's helping them to make critical decisions. And when we talk about that, you know, they're always talking about it's the personal relationships that they have with the Weather Service employees, that trusted relationships and the expertise that you bring to those conversations that allows those. So we're seeing it every day at a national level as we hear all of these stories that our people are truly driving our success. And the dedication, we always say it's really beyond compare, the dedication of our workforce to our science-based service to the nation. So that's an excellent one. And, you know, along the lines, of course, we have to have that expertise. So we're always striving to continually improve and make sure that we can provide the best forecast possible. And Louis mentioned the partnerships. We can't do it alone. And that means internally as well as externally. Inside of the Weather Service, across our centers of excellence, across our different regions, we need to reach out and talk with each other and tap into the expertise we have in-house, and then also the work we're doing with the partners. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. And lastly, again, just that culture that we've built, that we're always striving for excellence. We're excited maybe for 5 minutes when we make a great forecast, but you know, it's always the next thing. And I know because I've talked to a lot of the offices after an event, they're already triaging and saying this is what we can do better next time. So, but I think that culture really helps us be recognized for the expertise that we have. In the plan, what's one of the things that's different that I like to think about is something you call the rule of three. In our last strategic plan, we had 6 major goals, and they tended to be a little more thematic around our mission areas. And this one is much higher level and is cross-cutting when we think about the things we're doing. In the TED Talk series, they really popularized this idea of the rule of three. People can remember 3 things, and it helps you tell a very powerful story. So when we talk about building a weather-ready nation, we talk about ready, responsive, and resilient. You know, we all remember that, right? It's very easy to remember, and it's powerful. So in this strategic plan, we have 3 goals. And I think that really tells the story of who we are and what we're doing and the hard work that we have to do over the coming years. So, you know, we start with the idea of our key outcome, that we're trying to transform the way that people receive the information that we give, and that they can receive it easily, that they understand it, and it's so clear that they know exactly what they need to do to act on it to save lives. And that's a very powerful first goal. And so all of our decision support is moving in that direction. And of course, we've got to have the tools to be able to do that. So our science, our technology, our engineering, we want to harness that and make sure that we can change the way that we do things as technology changes and gives us new approaches. And then lastly, what's it going to take to be able to deliver on all these goals? It takes our people. Our people are core. So talking about the training, the career development that we need to do across all of our different disciplines. Again, the partnerships, and then making sure our organization is well run and whole so that we can deliver on the results.
Mary, if you don't mind, just going to build off of your thoughts on the core principles. I think one of the things that struck me that's different in this particular plan is we have the word science in there in terms of striving for excellence to improve mission performance, but there's also the word engineering in there, and I think that's distinctly different than what we've had in the past in terms of actually highlighting engineering as a competency and as a best practice that we strive for to improve mission performance. So there's a great deal we'll talk about today and looking through the plan that we need to accomplish to kind of get to where we need to be working through the plan. And a lot of that is deals with technology and how we're implementing that technology. So engineering as a competency and recognizing that inside of our culture is going to be really important. So when we're talking about that, it's really understanding the requirements that we have for what systems we want to build, making sure that we have the right life cycle costs and everything built in, and the right thinking for the future of how we're going to support those things, and just really moving forward, having the test plans and making sure that's really solid when we deliver that to operations, so that we have the mission performance that we desire.
Well, Mary, you mentioned the goals. So question on that. Then in the first goal, this is kind of something for all of you. The first goal is about continuing to improve the delivery of IDSS, transforming how people understand and use our information. So how do you see this driving all the work we're doing at different levels of the organization now and kind of in the future, since this is a strategic plan for the next few years?
I think I'd like to hand it to Kelsey to start us off.
All right. Well, I can say that, from a field perspective, we're very excited about building a weather-ready nation and continuing the work from the previous strategic plan and achieving the 3 goals that are laid in this plan over the next 3 years. In regards to IDSS, many would say that, the field and the agency has been providing IDSS for several years. What's different, though, is we now have a framework to provide IDSS. For the first time, we have a service description document that outlines what IDSS is, also a directive, which provides additional information and gives us that framework on how we provide that to our partners. Also, we have extensive training on IDSS and also a deployment ready program where we're deploying personnel working shoulder to shoulder with our partners, learning about their decision-making process, learning about thresholds and impacts to their operations, and we're providing information that's timely, relevant, and accurate so that they can make the most effective decision possible in the situations that they face. And from a tool perspective, we're also providing toolkits and resources to the field to help build a weather-ready nation and provide this information to our partners.
Kathy, you had mentioned earlier, we were talking today about what you guys are doing from DSS from a national center perspective.
That's right, and similar to what Kelsey had mentioned, we're also engaged in the training and participating in IDSS, but we're doing it at a national scale. So at the Weather Prediction Center, for example, we have core partners with National FEMA, with the Army Corps of Engineers, so we're right there during these high-impact, heavy precipitation events. But I also want to point out the Ocean Prediction Center. So let's not forget them in this too. So they've got core partnerships with the Coast Guard. So you think about search and rescue and you think about recovery activities. And then we even had examples recently of hurricane force events crossing out of our waters and doing that coordination then with the UK Met and Ireland.
Well, and then all of this kind of has to be supported by IT stuff, Dave. So how do you see that from your side of things?
Yeah, so kind of connecting the dots there, we talked a little bit about kind of the local scale and the national scale. And so one of the pieces is looking at getting to a consistent message, how we get to a common operating picture where both at the national and local scale, we're looking at the same things. We have the same types of tools that we can work together seamlessly at those scales to achieve a much more higher functioning collaborative forecast process. So one of the activities that we're working now is trying to get the national centers integrated into the AWIPS platform. So what this means is getting them in, getting all the forecast offices, all the forecast desks at the national center using the same tools that within AWIPS that the WFOs and the RFCs are using currently. And getting to this point will really help to not encourage, but to enable the collaboration, not just over the phone, but really in a true, rich sort of technology sense. Another activity that we have underway is simplifying some of the infrastructure that we have inside of AWIPS. or rather applications. So we're working to combine the River Pro and WarnGen and the GHG so that the forecasters, we had the problem of kind of the roller skates in the office where you had to roll from terminal to terminal many years ago, and now within AWIPS it's that same sort of problem, but working between those different applications. And so a meteorologist has to really memorize and understand what's going on between each application. And during high stress events, when you're trying to work with core partners, you're trying to work across the offices, you don't have to, you shouldn't have to, really have that type of pressure to understand what's going on between. So how do we simplify that? We're working on that with hazard services to try to combine that into one application. We're going to deploy that for the hydrology hazards in October, starting in October, and that's going to build for subsequent hazards for the next 2 years where we integrate those in. That's really going to simplify things both from the way we manage the software, but it's going to make training easier. We train to one application, and also simplify the user experience. As well, it'll create a framework where we can integrate other inputs into our warning process, so impact thresholds and so on.
Well, and I don't know, Kelsey, do you have any questions that you want to direct from the field over to Dave on what else he's doing to help you?
What I'd ask Dave, tell us more about the opportunity with AWIPS in the cloud.
AWIPS in the cloud. All right. So the way we have it laid out, I think that's a great question. I get that question a lot. The way we have it laid out currently is to take small steps forward to learn more about the technology without sacrificing our integrity in terms of availability and what we need to do to support the field in terms of making sure this doesn't go down, making sure we don't get too deep into something we don't understand. So we currently have a prototype underway where we've virtualized the back end of the forecast office, and that's in the lab now, and we're testing that and experimenting with that, and we plan over the next 2 years to roll that out to the forecast offices. And this is going to reduce the amount of hardware in the back room by about 50%. And it really is going to help, I think, with performance and also, I think, with ease of management of the system. But with that, we can really start to understand how AWIPS works on this technology and really move it more into something that would have a lighter weight client side and more cloud-like feel to it. So after we phase in all of this simplification in the back end of the forecast office, then we would think about moving to either to like a regional or national scale. And then that'll help with consolidating where our data is landing and really simplify all the data movement within the Weather Service. And that'll help us with more timely delivery and of forecast information, probably provide you a richer data set that you can work with. I don't know if that explains kind of what you're thinking or.
Yeah, looking forward to that. That certainly is something that would provide some flexibility and adaptability in regards to providing IDSS and from an operational standpoint, give us a lot of different ways that we can provide that service to the partners.
Absolutely.
Well, and a lot of the conversation so far has really been about DSS, and I know a lot of conversations we'll have, with different folks in the field and different offices is, are we losing the science side of what we're doing? We keep talking about this, decision support services, but how are we really doing this as a science-based service organization? How are we really making sure that new science and technology is helping to improve our forecasts and our services?
I can take this one. I've been thinking about this a lot. That's all my little scraps of paper here. There's so much going on. I mean, the first thing that you think about when you think about the science and technology improvements, of course, is the models. So we're moving from models that are essentially deterministic into a more of an ensemble-based approach. NOAA is definitely behind all the improvements that are coming, but this is a way to allow us to quantify the uncertainty a little bit. But along with not just the models, there's also a lot of effort in the pre-processing and the post-processing, so that's improving the way we handle the observations. And then, of course, near and dear to my heart is certainly the calibration of all of that model output. And so the National Blend of Models comes to mind. So that's a way to mine all of this ensemble information, produce probabilistic output from both weather service models and non-weather service models to give us that common starting point. And then I guess another area I want to think about when you think about the science and technology too is the relationship that we have with OAR and the labs out there, and then certainly the test beds. So JTTI, or the Joint, I'm going to get this wrong, the Joint Technology Transfer Initiative, okay, that is certainly an effort to try to focus a lot of the innovations in science and technology into ways to improve our forecasts. So this is one area we can look to find tools and techniques that are really going to improve the way we do our job and help us improve our forecast.
As Kathy was talking about our work with OAR, it just reminds me something that's at a higher level that's near and dear to my heart is the whole emphasis that we place on research to operations and operations to research. And we've really been pushing the operations to research. So the opportunities that we'll have even experimentally when we first started rolling out FV3, making it available to the community as we go through with that implementation, working with Dr. Jacobs on his initiative to get that community-based modeling interaction really energized and supported and resourced. That's a pretty exciting path forward as well on that. And then I'd also like to mention, water is clearly a new focus. We've, our science and engineering and hydrology is catching up with the demand. Certainly in the West, there's major water resources issues, and we have too much and too little in different places, as we're seeing right now with the floods in the Midwest. So that's pretty exciting, and that's also something that we're doing in partnership with the RFCs and the hydrologists and the folks at the Water Center, as well as with our colleagues in both the Ocean Service, working on coupling up the coast with the terrestrial water, and then with OAR, of course. So some really exciting things that are going on there as well.
And I'd also say from a field perspective that science is our foundation. And as a science-based service organization, it's important that we maintain high quality data, model sets, because that really builds the service that we're providing from an IDSS perspective. So you still got to have high quality data. You still have to have high quality models and that information that you're providing to your partners in the decision-making process that they're doing. You can do the best briefing in the world, but if you don't have strong science behind it and high quality information and your forecast is wrong, then really your IDSS also starts to break down.
Yeah, I think, coupled with all the pushing of the science, we need to ensure that we also have the computing to keep up with that. So in terms of high performance computing, Mary mentioned the community modeling initiative, and that's one to try to ensure that there's an infrastructure in place where we can really embrace the community modeling and to have the ability to come together and have an infrastructure to do that. On the operations side as well, we need to ensure that our high performance computing capability stays up to par. We do have a new 10-year contract that we're working on for our high performance computing, and there's been a lot of work in terms of how we integrate a strategy looking forward into the future that takes into account how industry is unfolding and all of those risks. So I think we have a good plan in place, and we'll be working on that shortly in the next year.
Excellent. Well, one of my next questions is, when I was reading through, I don't know if when you were all reading through the strategic plan with, taking as significant notes as I was going through the plan, right? Yeah. That I noticed constant themes that kept coming back up. And the one that kept hitting me smack in the face was teamwork emphasis. And maybe it's just because it's near and dear to my heart because we focus on it a lot in Leadership Academy with all the training we do. But teamwork is something that seemed to come in at all levels. Louis mentioned it earlier with IAEM and those partnerships externally. I think we've had some touches on it, but I feel like moving from that me to we mentality is something that can apply in so many ways. And so I wonder what your thoughts are on how teamwork plays into your different areas.
start out with this. I mean, certainly at the Weather Prediction Center, we'd like to think that we're a leader in the collaborative forecast process. Also OPC as well too, but during winter events, during heavy precip events, during these extreme events like landfalling hurricanes, the collaboration is so crucial. When you've got such an extreme event, you want to have a consistent message, one forecast from the Weather Service during the worst of these events. And certainly the collaboration, it can be, I know it's a source of frustration, I'm sure at WPC, at the forecasters, and even at some of the WFOs. There's a lot of compromise that has to take place. But in the end, it's not about who has the best forecast. It really is about having one forecast that we can message together.
Yeah, and that's a great example, Kathy. And I think, I like the idea of the one NWS, one forecast, and I think then expanding the we, not only to we Weather Service or we NOAA, but also to we the weather enterprise. And that's a big thing that I think about when we're thinking about the partnerships. And when we were planning this, Jeremy asked questions of all of us, and she said, well, what's changed? What's different for you and what you do? And for me, this emphasis on the partnerships with the weather enterprise is something that affects my day-to-day efforts and the things that we're doing. So one of the things we've done is work with our team at headquarters to really revamp our partnership meetings. We do those 3 times a year. We've really turned them in from a tell to a dialogue, and moved that into an interactive experience. We talk to them. We ask them about what kinds of things they want to hear. We bring, if you will, customers or stakeholders in that are in common, both to the private sector weather enterprise as well as to NOAA, and have conversations with them together and talk about how we can serve their needs better. And I think that's really made a difference in terms of even in the throes of a extreme event, being able to message and making sure that they will be there to help leverage the messages and get the safety information out during a critical event. Obviously, as we've laid out in the SDD document that Kelsey mentioned, it is important to be clear about what our roles are and responsibilities and how we do that. We had, last summer, we had a Pathfinders workshop. This is where we get together with local forecast office folks and state departments of transportation all across the country. And we have some really exciting partnerships that are happening there. A lot of times the state DOTs have contracted with a private sector weather company, but we've sorted that out. This is a program that Department of Transportation sponsored, so they were sort of the third work with the Federal Highways Group, but specifically wanted to get those on the weather sector together. And so it's pretty clear that we're doing the forecasting of the synoptic event, if you will, or the mesoscale event locally. But as one place I was, they were talking about, well, we're forecasting, what's coming down and what's going to be on the shoulder. And these guys at the Department of Transportation, the private sector folks, they're worried about, exactly at what temperature it's going to melt, how to interact with particular sets of chemicals, and what exactly is happening on the road surface, and that type of detailed things. It's not our bailiwick. So I think that's just one detailed example, but those kinds of partnerships with that weather enterprise are far and wide, and that's really expanding our ability to reduce the impact of these extreme events.
So I'll throw one back at Kelsey, actually. So we talked about, service delivery and kind of the operational side. And so now in terms of enhancements, what are your thoughts on from the field, capturing ideas and thoughts and integrating those up? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's important. We've talked about the whole enterprise concept, the whole agency concept. We've got the whole office concept, and coordination and collaboration between the field and headquarters and the rest of the weather enterprise certainly is vital. I think there's a lot of different ways to do that. Offices collaborating with their neighbors, exchanging ideas and information, whether through attending conferences or sharing information through the VLab, lots of different ways. Sharing information as we start to work through an annual operating plan. Keep those ideas coming, keep those thoughts coming. Be familiar with the strategic plan. Look for opportunities to tie back to the strategic plan and continue conversations like we're having here at all levels within the organization and the agency.
One thing we've been working on is thinking about how to make it easier for some of that core talent in the field that really understands how some of that technology works and how to develop and how we can kind of capture that talent. So we've been working on some projects in terms of making it easier to for people to come in and really get integrated quickly with our development environment, particularly with AWIPs. So we're testing those out. That is actually one piece that I forgot to mention with the cloud side of it is, for operations, going into straight into a cloud-like environment may be dangerous. For starters, if you're not really careful, but for testing and for development, and even for sharing of data, I know the SUs get frustrated in terms of case building and how that information gets through. So we're working on some of those things to try to improve that sort of capability, because we recognize that we need to capture that talent and really see how we can focus and harness that into these efforts that will improve the whole effort from a national scale.
Yeah, I certainly think it's valuable and important, especially in requirements development process and also in the design process of prototypes and testing and gathering feedback along the way to make sure that it is going to work in the field and that those ideas are infused into the end product.
Well, just one more reminder that if you want any questions answered, please feel free to submit those. We've got folks who are collecting them over here, and we're going to go to those after I ask one last question. So in Leadership Academy, one of my favorite classes that we do is the new hires class. And the coolest thing about this class is that we bring together people from all job series. It's not just meteorologists in class with other meteorologists. So we've got admin people, we've got people from headquarters, we've got people from RFCs meetings, CWSU, and it's really great to get people engaging on how each individual contributes to the mission. And so when we're talking about this new strategic plan, how do you see people of all different job series contributing towards these new goals in the plan?
The new hires class is amazing. I'm lucky enough that I get to go to a lot of them, and myself or Louis or one of the other members of our executive council attends every class. John Murphy's attended several as well, because the energy is so great, and we get to talk about the wonderful mission of the Weather Service and make sure that we talk about building a weather-ready nation and talk through these stories so that they can identify and that we've got a common culture and common touch points to build on throughout their career. So it was a great idea, and the Academy has done a great job of developing the class. One of the things that I do when I speak to the class, first of all, we've all along as the strategic plan's been developing, we've been giving them little bits and pieces of it so that they understand what's in there and why it's in there. But one of the things we do is, for those of you who've participated in the Weather Service National Stand-Up every morning, I actually show a couple of the first slides from that stand-up, because the very first, the second slide, after we talk about what level we're at, what we do is we go through our systems and we say what's going on with that. And that's one of the ways that I talk to folks, and I say, whether you're an ET who's out there repairing our equipment, an IT person who's making sure the computers are working, folks that are taking observations, all of these things are really critical. Folks that are keeping our facilities up, we even have that. So it's really powerful to show them that, even at the headquarters level, we are checking on that every day. And then we have a conversation. We talk about, as Louis said, the ASAs being our Weather Ready Nation ambassadors. They're the first person that walks in the door, and they're able to greet people with sorry about that. Greet people with the with that message of what we do and why we're doing it, and really help them feel that they can embrace things. And, from our HMTs, our hydrologists, our meteorologists, all the folks across our system, everybody plays a key role. And we need all of those pieces working well before we'll even be able to think about IDSS. And what's great is I talk to folks after the class, and they are just so energized and excited and really identify with the mission of the Weather Service. So it's a great way to get folks started.
We had a mic problem.
kind of related to this, one of the things I've been thinking about since, I was asked to participate in the panel discussion is how folks can get involved in the science and the technology innovations that are happening too. So kind of the first place I went was to VLab. So, surf the VLab, right? You'd be surprised at all the great ideas that are out there. The pseudo projects are documented on a dashboard anybody can see. There's a neat ideas page out there with a lot of suggestions from field folks and projects they want to pursue. Take a look at the NRAP assignments. So those close on May 10th, but there are STI opportunities in there. If you want to go work with, one of the labs, you can go to OIR, go to MDL. There's opportunities for folks that want to learn project management. There's opportunities out there, even, for our admin staff. And that's a way to, increase your networking, improve your resume, for example. And then I wanted to maybe even mention, while I've got the mic here, think about a forecaster exchange. Come to a national center. Our national center folks, certainly as staffing allows, but it's a way to, try out new tools and new techniques and see how the other side does it. So,
Okay, well then I'm going to jump onto, we got some really good questions from in the room and online. So one of them is social and behavioral sciences are included as part of the strategic plan as increasing the effectiveness of communication for how partners use their information. How will this be further incorporated into operations?
I'll get started. I'm really excited about the prevalence of this in our plan and really across all of our partners that are helping us develop our work. I was just at the Science Advisory Board meeting a week or so ago, and there was a whole unit that we talked about there about decision science, which is really what we're talking about. And there's a lot we have to learn. It's not necessarily what a lot of us went to school for. So one of the things we're looking for at the national level is a next step is how we can embed that decision science a little closer to where we're working on some of the science Kathy was talking about. Because if you have the interdisciplinary interaction a little closer to where we're developing our new tools, it'll be much more organic and infuse things so that we're developing them right from the beginning in a way that's going to be a little bit more user-friendly, and it's going to have the impact that we want, because ultimately we are trying to reduce the impact of that weather. And if we're thinking about including the message, how it's going to be received, what information people know to make their decision, right when we start, even on the science side, even with a new model or a new post-processing tool, new graphics, that can make a huge difference.
I think building on that, we got a question about, in the strategic plan, they believe it demonstrates the need for key competencies like communication, which aren't necessarily reflected in our current education or experience requirements for a lot of the job series. How might we address that gap?
I think a large part of the communication in regards to IDSS, there is pretty extensive training that is out there on the LMS as part of that series of training, which is an effort to meet that gap. Also, part of that too is working with partners, going through exercises and to gain that experience.
Yeah, so one thing we've thought about within central processing is to actually bring on somebody on board full-time dedicated to outreach, dedicated towards connecting the dots. So central processing, we tend to be more focused on making sure all the systems within the Weather Service run. So we're not communicating as much outward from the Weather Service, but at least communicating within the Weather Service and then throughout OAR and other line offices, how all those efforts come together and really connecting the dots to make sure that everybody knows what's going on. People have an opportunity to participate. So we have somebody dedicated within central processing that tries to connect those dots. And that's really paid off quite a bit for us to really ensure that we're really incorporating all the feedback that we need to get into our programs. So I fully agree with the question in terms of the importance of communication. It sometimes can be seen as a softer thing, but that can pay huge dividends in terms of overall performance of the mission.
We'll start tossing it. So the one last thing I just wanted to mention is thinking about communication as a competency. And, you know, one of the things we're doing with GS 5 to 12 is we're talking about competency and competency models. And I think, you know, this is something I've done previously in my career. I think developing competency models in a generic way for more of our workforce is an important thing, because basically it just lays out how can I develop the skill and what does it look like, and how can I gain that talent. So I think having it included as a competency is really going to help drive the training and make sure folks can get that. And experiential learning is a big part of it. So I'm thinking about the hurricane messaging class that just finished up, right? A lot of the elements of messaging and advocating to decision makers are part of that class.
When we have another one that kind of gets into some of the training, I'm loving that there's all these training questions. Thank you. My WFO is receiving an increasing number of questions from media and partners about climate change. Is there a plan to train Weather Service employees so we provide consistent, valid information on the science, impacts, and protective actions?
So I don't know what we've got in the training wheelhouse, but it's a great point. And I would say our colleagues in other parts of NOAA have worked really hard on this. We have a climate toolkit. There's a special climate website that's really it's very magazine formatted, so it's kind of nice in terms of the key messages. So one of the things we can do is amass those things. NCEI, of course, deals with a lot of the climate questions. It's where our data archives are. So I think this is obviously we have our own climate expertise in terms of our role, but it is bigger than just what Weather Service does. So I think we can pull those tools and make sure we get them out to folks. But
I think it kind of fits within this broader strategic plan of this talk of teamwork. This is an opportunity, right, for building more teamwork capabilities with CPC and folks in OAR if they're doing this. We'll take this note for John Ogren. No. All right, so the last one, unless we have any others coming up, we've got some more. Okay. How does this plan align with the NOAA and DOC strategic plans?
I can take that one. So currently there is not a NOAA strategic plan. Dr. Jacobs or Dr. Gallaudet, when they talk, they really talk about two major priorities that they have. And one of them is to advance our Earth system approach and our Earth system models and improve that whole approach and reduce the impact of extreme weather events. And then the other is, I won't quote this right, but it's basically to enhance our sustainable ocean efforts. And so that includes our efforts with the wider enterprise on the ocean side, which we call blue economy, and support decision makers in the ocean space, as well as making sure we have sustainable food sources, things like aquaculture and that type of thing. So those are the administration's two NOAA priorities. But the Department of Commerce, when the administration came in, one of the things that they uniquely did is they really delved down into all the bureaus of commerce and talked about what the strategic elements should be. So this is not always true, but right now, Department of Commerce Strategic Goal 3.3 is called Reducing the Impacts of Extreme Weather and Water Events. So we are front and center and a leader, even particularly the Weather Service, a leader on one of the main Department of Commerce goals. So it's very tied into that.
All right, and Kathy, I think we have one for you now. With the with the National Ice Center transition to the National Weather Service, how does the strategic plan link to high latitude services and R2O?
Wow, thank you. Yeah, so Goal 3, of course, talks a little bit about maybe any realignment that would expand our mission, our services, and the Ice Center comes to mind. Back to my math. If you may not know, the National Ice Center, the NOAA component of that, is going to move from NOSDIS to the Ocean Prediction Center into NSEP. So it's a tri-agency group that's made primarily of Navy, NOAA, and the Coast Guard. They've got a mission, for sea ice analysis, the high latitudes, Great Lakes, and Chesapeake Bay even. And as we're seeing the high latitudes open up a bit more, you're seeing more recreation, you're seeing more exploration of resources, more shipping is happening, and then, of course, along with all of that goes more search and rescue. So we want to expand the mission not only to an analysis device, but also to a forecasting component, which makes it fit better within the Weather Service. And having that aligned within the Weather Service will add some efficiencies too in the way that all that ice information can get into our modeling. It'll improve the partnerships even with the climate forecasting for ice as well.
Excellent. Well, and I think we are coming up on the hour here. We're going to let Mary close it out with some final thoughts if she would like to share them. But just as a reminder, if any questions are still coming in, we didn't get a chance to answer them, the answers will go up on the Insider when the recording of this goes up sometime in the next couple weeks or whenever they can get the closed captioning done for the recording. So thank you all for attending here at NCWCP and online. And Mary, would you like to close us out?
Well, thanks to all of our panelists. I really appreciated the dialogue, and would just like to say I hope you've heard some things that get you intrigued about the new strategic plan, and hopefully you'll pick up a copy and take a look at that and think about what components in there are exciting for you that you can identify with and that are going to be a part of the plans that you have for helping build a weather-ready nation. So we look forward to more comments and conversation as we come around and visit with all of you. That's it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.